We're joined, as promised, by Sarah Baxter from the Mary Colvin Centre for International Reporting in New York. Welcome back to you, Sarah.
Hello there, John.
Hi, it's lovely to have you here. I mean, there's loads of things that we can talk about. We'll try and get through a fraction of them. I'm going to pick up with the latest lines coming out now on the war in Ukraine, Sarah. I know you've been watching this develop. We've been hearing from Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian leader, after the latest back and forward on a peace deal, if it can be called that. And Zelensky, we now see reported, he's been reporting on the American attitude to getting closer to a deal. And he says America wants Ukraine to withdraw its troops from the Donbas region, that key region in the east, some of which is now occupied by Russia, some of which is still being contested by Ukraine. And we have Zelensky telling us that Washington is now suggesting a compromise in which Ukrainian troops would withdraw from the Donbas. Russian troops wouldn't advance into that territory. Also seems to be suggesting, Sarah, that on the question of ceding territory to Russia, well, Zelensky is suggesting a referendum might be the way forward. That is an answer to Trump saying openly that it's time for Ukraine to look seriously at an election. And maybe that's quite a canny stroke by Zelensky, isn't it, Sarah? Because if there's to be a referendum on conceding territory to Russia, Ukrainians will say no.
Well, that's right. I think that's what Zelensky is counting on. It's very, very interesting, this latest idea of a sort of demilitarized zone in the Donbas and having a free economic zone. You know, we know that the Americans are rather interested in getting their hands on some Ukrainian spoils, I'm sorry to say. But at the same time, if the Russians can be persuaded not to occupy bits of the Donbas that they haven't won by force, and the Americans are willing to back off, seemingly ceding land to Russia for really nothing in exchange for the Ukrainians, this is an interesting compromise and way forward. It does carry risks, as Zelensky himself has suggested. If, say, you had a demilitarized zone in the Donbas where there were neither Ukrainian nor Russian forces, what's actually to stop Russia just bulldozing back in, as soon as it gets the earliest opportunity? But if the Americans are invested in the free economic zone plan, it is possible that might hold. And then the idea of a referendum where the Ukrainian people say, well, no, they don't want to give up land to the Russians that they've been fighting to keep in Ukrainian hands. Well, this is obviously a potential way forward as well. So, it does look like there's been genuine progress. I don't want to get overexcited.
What do you think about this, Adam?
Well, I think what is most interesting is the way that Zelensky is actually engaging with the American proposals and coming up with counter proposals and responding to them. And I think clearly everything he's doing is designed to defang the original 28-day plan. There is obviously a question about democracy in Ukraine, which is one of the weaknesses that Donald Trump has zoned in on, because they haven't been able to hold elections because they've been in a state of war. My feeling, however, is that the area of the Donbas which is in contention is so strategic in terms of the defense of wider Ukraine that, as a demilitarized zone, pretty difficult to deliver that and maintain Ukrainian security, because obviously the thought would be that when they saw an opportunity, Russia would roll into it.
Yeah. Sarah?
Yeah, that's definitely what worries Zelensky, no question about it. It's just, it does seem like there's some wiggle room at last that might deliver peace. At the moment, unfortunately, the Ukrainians are not doing well on the ground, and that is hobbling them as well.
Yes. Engagement is engagement, and it does keep the ball in play, doesn't it? And that maybe changes the mood somewhat. But the conviction on the Ukrainian side, and actually on the European side too, and no doubt some in Washington, is that this is Putin playing the same old games. He does not want a deal. He does not want peace. He wants to keep on doing what he's doing and let everyone else dance around in circles. So maybe there's an inevitability, at the next round of meetings, Sarah, for the ball just to fall once again at the feet of Donald Trump. And the question is going to be the same question. Now, what are you going to do about it? We're still at the impasse. Look at Russia. They're not moving. It's time for you to push. And then the question again is, Mr. President, are you going to do that, Sarah?
Yeah, well, he doesn't really want to push Vladimir Putin at all. I mean, he does want to, collect a peace award, not just a phony one from FIFA. So he does want Putin to give some ground, but he's not at all invested in the Ukrainian side in the way that we would like him to be. And he still is determined to welcome back Vladimir Putin on the big stage where he thinks Russia belongs alongside China and the US. And it's a sort of world view where, the big powers kind of carve up the world between them. Zelensky, I think, though, has made some ground in the sense that only a couple of days ago, Donald Trump was berating Zelensky for not even really having bothered to read the latest peace plan from the Americans. And this is showing that Zelensky's taking their offer seriously, but actually saying this is, we need to have our own interests safeguarded nevertheless. So Zelensky has constantly been trying to do what he can in the face of Trump, who really would rather play with the big boy Russian bad guy. But Ukraine remains popular in America. Americans don't like Putin, no matter how hard Trump tries to make them. And I don't think that Americans will react kindly to Trump completely selling Ukraine down the river.
This story, still developing story about Venezuela and the storming and seizing of that oil tanker in the Caribbean. President Trump, is making no secret whatever of this being just another stage in the ramping up of the pressure on Maduro, who he clearly wants out. We've also got the new Nobel Prize winner who's endorsing Trump. And there's an interesting dynamic there too, isn't there? Because she was, given that medal, many people believe, as a kind of implicit rebuke to Donald Trump. She's an opposition figure and a brave one to Nicolas Maduro. She now supports Donald Trump, although, as I say, she was kind of like a walking rebuke, some argue, in the eyes of the Nobel Peace Prize Committee. But, from her point of view, it makes, you could argue, perfect sense, because that's the way to get rid of this man, the oppressor that she wants to see out and replace.
Yeah, I think she's been extremely warm about President Trump and kind of dedicated her prize to him anyway when she first got it in hiding. Now, the Wall Street Journal has come out with this amazing cloak and dagger story about how she escaped from Venezuela, passed through, 10 checkpoints disguised onto a small fishing vessel, alerting the United States that they were not one of those ones that they ought to be striking from the air as a drug smuggling boat themselves, and made her way all the way to Norway. Absolutely astonishing story. This is Corina Machado, of course, and she is a right-wing critic of Maduro, and in that sense sees Donald Trump as a natural ally. But there's no question she has enormous popular support, extraordinarily brave woman. And I don't think it was ever right to really read that Nobel Prize as a rebuke to Trump.
You don't share that view, right?
No, I think it was a way of sort of, sidestepping the awkward embarrassment of not giving it to Donald Trump, but giving it to somebody that he wouldn't disapprove of. And her daughter was amazingly eloquent, accepting the award. And now, of course, Machado herself has been speaking in Oslo and saying Venezuela has effectively been invaded anyway by Iran, Hezbollah, Russia, drug cartels, prostitution rackets, etc. So, she's clearly not bothered about any rumblings about a US invasion. And meanwhile, Trump has made it very clear that he's an adherent of the old Monroe Doctrine, where anything in America's backyard in the Americas is really the United States' business.
Yes.
And that's what we saw with the repelling of special forces on board this oil tanker. They seized, $70 million worth of oil cargo, which Trump now says, we'll probably keep. And Maduro's calling piracy. If it isn't a war, it's preciously close to one.
Yeah, and the sort of business motive, to use the word business, not entirely appropriate, is a pretty nakedly clear motive. in some ways, it also goes back to the days of Kissinger and the dealings of the United States in Latin America, moving in and planting leaders here and there, willy-nilly, almost. And the objection, and I said it very, very clearly, as is the hope and the dream of getting American hands on that oil. I spoke yesterday to Professor Sir Anthony Beaver. He spoke about this as a kind of I don't know, extortion racket. Matthew Syed in his column at the weekend was very blunt about all of this. The weird thing, Adam, is it's now seen as normal.
Yeah, and this is what Donald Trump has managed to do, to kind of completely monetize the presidency for himself and his family. And I think, in fairness to Henry Kissinger, it's important to say that although the United States had a very quite sinister policy of supporting right-wing regimes throughout Latin America, who themselves were quite often involved in smuggling of illicit material and all the rest of it, that I don't think Henry Kissinger or indeed the federal government at the time actually profited directly or sought to extract value from their client states. It was rather the other way around, that they supported governments, and they had a thing called Operation Torture, which was kind of organised rendition and detention of people that they saw as dangerous communists across Latin America, which they did in cooperation with countries including Paraguay and Argentina. But I mean, that was political, and it was America policing its own backyard, but it was motivated by higher politics. This seems to be motivated by crude greed, really, of the country, which does have the greatest oil reserves. Although I have to say, it will be an irony and a problem for those people criticising America if the result of this policy is that Donald Trump installs a Nobel Peace Prize winner as the president of Venezuela, and it will, of course, strengthen his claims for the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes.